Hi everyone. Today we're going to talk about strategies for close reading, and I'm going to do my best to make this entire lesson between 10 and 15 minutes long, which is even shorter than it would be if I were in person there. Strategies for close reading. The idea of close reading isn't how close you are to the book. Okay, it's all about reading critically and really engaging and interacting with the text in a deep and meaningful way. So, readers have to do so much inside their minds, and this all takes place simultaneously. You're supposed to visualize and make connections and comprehend and infer and question and all of this other stuff. And then it's just exhausting sometimes. And how do you know when to ask a question? What if you don't have any questions? And how do I know when to infer anything? It's really crazy. I want you to rest assured that this all becomes really natural and you can do all of that simultaneously once you learn to do a little trick that we like to teach called notice and note. Okay, so in order for me to explain what I mean by notice and note, I want to talk about journeys. If you've ever taken like a road trip, a vacation, which is kind of a journey to anywhere, you probably have noticed a lot of things along the way. Sights, smells, foods, hotels, memories, all of that stuff you noticed. So just like an actual journey, with reading, we encounter so much along the way. Reading is a journey itself. And I know that kind of sounds cliche, but I'm a reading teacher. But the bottom line is that on a journey, you notice things. On journeys and trips, one of the things you probably notice, like on a road trip or something, are signs. Whenever you come across a sign, drivers are supposed to do something. You're not supposed to just look at these signs and not act on them. You're supposed to look at these signs and follow their instructions and learn to drive correctly. In reading, it's the exact same. The author has planted these signs, which I'm going to refer to as signposts. They've planted these signs within their writing. Okay, why does any of that matter? Well, because you're supposed to notice the signposts and do something. For example, the author wants you to notice things and clues that he or she has planted, like conflict or theme or character, climax or setting or inferences. It's going to help you to understand all of those things so much better if you can notice different signposts. When you take a journey through a book, don't forget to stop at any of the notice and note signposts. There are actually 6 classic signposts that exist in nearly all of literature. These researchers went through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of not just teen and young adult books, but all books, and they found these same things occurring over and over. They boiled it down to these 6 classic signposts. Now, I'm hoping that some of you are familiar with this from last year. If you're not, it's okay. The bottom line is that you need to always stop at these notice and note signposts that we're going to be reviewing. Here are the 6 signposts: memory moment, contrasts and contradictions, aha moment, words of the wiser, tough questions, and again. Today we're really just going to focus on 3 though: again and again, contrasts and contradictions, and aha moments. We'll cover the other 3 another day. All right, so there is a formula to all of this. The first thing is that you notice the signpost. The second thing is that you note or write an answer to that signpost's anchor question. The second step is really important. My students last year got really good at the first step, which is noticing. They were like, oh, it's an aha moment. Oh, it's a contrast and contradiction. They always noticed it, but it was the second step that will make a reader advanced. It would be like me noticing stop signs as I drive, but not taking any action. It's not good enough to just be like, oh, I see a stop sign, I'm going to breeze right through it. You have to actually stop at that stop sign or do whatever that sign says to do. Notice and note, and then write. The first one we're going to talk about today is the again and again signpost. Whenever you notice something happening over and over and over in a book, whether it's the same actions or whether it's a certain word that gets repeated or a situation, when you have anything happening again and again, here's the anchor question. It's written in red. You would ask yourself this: why does this keep showing up again and again? Now, the answer to that anchor question is going to reveal to you what the theme or the conflict is, or sometimes what it will do is foreshadow something for later on. So to give you an example of an again and again, I want you to think back to The Veldt by Ray Bradbury. That had a ton of again and again in it. Throughout the story, certain ideas or words even occurred over and over. Now, if I was there, I'd actually have you turn and talk. but this is a video, so you're not going to turn and talk. Remember how yellow happened again and again? Remember how there were vultures again and again? There's a bunch that happened again and again. One of the things that I specifically remember is that more than one time, George found items that belonged to him and Lydia, like a wallet and then a scarf. The fact that it happens more than once really tunes me in as a reader, and I'm like, whoa, red flag. So here's what my sticky note would look like as a reader. Okay. I made a sticky note about again and again. And at the top, you're going to notice that I identified the signpost A and A again and again, and the page number. So you would do this same thing in your reading. Then the next thing I do is make my observation, and here it is. For the second time in the story, George Hadley enters the nursery and finds objects, the wallet and the scarf, that belong to him and Lydia. Both times the objects are chewed up and have blood and saliva on them. Okay, so that right there, that was my observation. That's the notice part of notice and note. Then the next thing, of course, is this red sentence, which is the anchor question. So my question is, why does this keep happening again and again? Well, here's my answer. The blood makes me wonder if Bradbury is hinting at something dangerous about the nursery. So I've answered the anchor question. It keeps happening again and again because I think the author is hinting at something dangerous about the nursery. Then I'm going to take it a step further. I'm going to draw a conclusion or make an inference. Here it is. Perhaps he is trying to foreshadow that something bad will happen to the parents. Okay, obviously I've already read the story and I know something bad that was going to happen, but the first time I read it, the very first time I read it, that thought went through my head. As soon as they found the wallet and the scarf, I knew that that was symbolic that something bad was going to happen to the parents. Okay, so that's an example of a sticky note. And that was again and again. Now we're going to move on to the next signpost, and that's contrasts and contradictions. Contrasts and contradictions. When you're reading and a character says or does something that is opposite of what you expect them to do, you should stop and ask yourself the anchor question, which is, why is the character doing that? Any contradictory behavior, if the character acts different than the way they used to act, or if the character does something that is totally opposite of what anybody else in society would do, that's a contrast and contradiction. The answer to the anchor question could really help you make an inference about the plot. I want you to think back to Thank You, Ma'am by Langston Hughes. Think about anything unexpected that happened in that story. Anything that contrasted or differed from what you considered to be normal. I mean, I'm thinking back to it. Like the entire story is a series of contrasts and contradictions. Like you think back to Mrs. Jones, she doesn't call the cops after the kid tries to steal her purse. And she takes him home, washes his face, feeds him, gives him money. All of that is super unexpected. I don't know a lot of people who would ever act like that after being almost stolen from. So we would have to ask ourselves the anchor question, which is, why is the character doing that? So here's an example of my sticky note if I were to read. And I'm giving you these examples because you're going to be expected to make sticky notes that follow this exact formula. At the top, you would identify the signposts, so C and C for contrast and contradiction, as well as the page number. Then I'm going to go ahead and make my notice, my observation for the notice and note. So I've noticed that Mrs. Jones doesn't call the cops. In fact, she takes Roger home, and that totally contradicts what most people would do. So then, of course, you always ask your anchor question, which is, why is she doing that? And here's my answer. I wonder why she's doing that because she once got a second chance in life, and this is her way of paying it forward. So I don't know that for sure. I'm just wondering. That's why I think that she takes Roger home. Maybe she's paying it forward. And then I'm going to draw a little conclusion about this character. I'm drawing the conclusion that she's a pretty compassionate soul. All right, so that was contrasts and contradictions. I'm going to do it with another one from that same story. Thank you, ma'am. This one's from page 3. Mrs. Jones is giving Roger money for shoes? This contrasts with what most people would do after being stolen from. Why is she doing that? That's the anchor question. Here's my answer. I have a feeling that the author wants to teach us that grace and mercy is a better way to teach people a lesson than punishment. Could this be a theme? The last signpost that we're going to review today is the aha moment. This is when you've seen this probably 1,000 times in a movie or in a book, when you're reading and all of a sudden the character realizes something or understands something. There's that moment where the character's like, oh. When that happens, you have to stop and ask yourself the anchor question. How might this change things? Please notice, A lot of times kids don't understand aha moment. They think it's when you, the reader, has an aha moment. It's not about you having an aha moment. It's about the character having the aha moment. When the character finally understands or figures something out. Okay, that will lead you to learn about the theme or the conflict probably. I want to give you guys some textual clues because this really helps you find an aha moment. Look for things like this. Suddenly I realized, or in an instant the answer was there, or I now knew, or I finally understood. These types of things are going to clue you in to a character's aha moment. I will say that not all aha moments are instantaneous. Sometimes it's a slow, steady realization. What I want you to look for is just that moment of clarity that a character experiences. So here's the example we're going to use. Do you remember reading The Yellow Star, The Legend of King Christian X of Denmark? We read that the other day for our summative assessment. Let's first recap the story just to make sure we all understand it. So remember, it said all the Danes in Denmark loved their king. Okay, King Christian. He was a kind, wonderful ruler. Well, then, of course, World War II starts, and the Nazis are taking over everything, and they want to fly the swastika flag in Denmark as a symbol of power and control. Okay, King Christian, if you remember, he wants to stand up to the Nazis. It's clear that he really loves his people. Obviously, one day, all of those flyers, those pamphlets rained down, and that pamphlet exclaimed that there's a new rule from the Nazis that all the Jews have to wear the yellow star. Think about this. The Jews had to wear the yellow star because the Nazis wanted to know who was a Jew and who wasn't so that they could go ahead and abuse the Jews. So wearing the star was their way of knowing who to abuse. Remember from the story, King Christian was really, really upset about that. And he was full of internal conflict because he thought, okay, if I fight against this, it's, a lot of my people will die for me fighting against the Nazis. But if I don't fight against this, then a lot of my people will die, the Jewish people, the Jewish Danes. So he really felt like he had to do something, but he didn't know how to do it without people getting hurt as a result. So you might remember he was pondering this problem. He's looking up at the starry night sky and he says, "If you wished to hide a star," wondered the king to himself, "where would you place it?" His eyes searched the heavens. Of course, he thought. The answer was so simple. Do you notice the aha moment? Of course, he thought. The answer was so simple. You would hide it among its sisters. The king summoned his tailor, who always designed the king's clothing, and then it goes on and on. And if you remember, by the end of the story, there's some pictures that show we can infer what his solution was, that all the Danes would wear a star, not just the Jewish Danes. So therefore, the Jews wouldn't stand out in a negative way. They would sort of be camouflaged. If everyone's wearing a star, then the Nazis don't know who's a Jew and who's not a Jew. So they were essentially hidden. Obviously, you don't do sticky notes after you're done reading. You do them as you're reading. So for the purpose of this example, pretend like I didn't already know the end of the story, okay? Imagine I was pausing to make this prediction before I had finished reading. All right, so aha moment, I put at the top, paragraph 18. So I identified the signpost and the page number, or the paragraph number in this case. And here's what I noticed. I noticed that King Christian had an aha moment. He finally has a solution for the Jewish star problem. That's my observation. The aha moment anchor question is, how might this change things? Now I'm going to make up an answer. It's kind of going to be a prediction because I don't really know how it will change things. I'm just going to predict. I think he's going to do something to hide the Jews among the other Danes, something that involves sewing or clothing since he's calling his tailor. Maybe the Jews will somehow remain safe in this country because of whatever the solution is. That was my answer. Now I'm going to take it a step further by drawing a conclusion or making an inference. The fact that he cares shows what a powerful leader he is. Could this be a possible theme? All right, so at this point, I want you guys to get practice with noticing and noting these signposts. I want you to do it with the outsiders. You're only going to be responsible for these three again and again: contrasts and contradictions, an aha moment. You will have to turn in one of your stop and jots based on one of these signposts the day of our book clubs for the outsiders. So you might come across like 5 or 6 again and agains, 2 or 3 contrasts and contradictions, and no aha moments. That's normal. You don't always come across all of them all the time. All I'm going to be collecting is 1 or 2 or 3 from you. I'm not going to expect you to do like 10 or 12 of these. I just want a couple stop and jots based on these notice and note signposts. following the formula that I've laid out in this video. Thanks, guys, and good luck.